Welcome to Keeping Up with Trends. This is Fed Razak, Senior Trading Strategist here at CMTrading. And we're joined with your host, Sergio Davids.
Hey man, all
Hey.
good.
So what do we got on the plate today?
Well, all eyes on, gold hitting record highs and Bitcoin, breaching 34K, which is amazing for both of those assets. But I thought before we start, I want to get your thoughts on a business development from McDonald's.
Okay.
So McDonald's has launched a new spin-off brand called Cosmix. So spelled COS, MC, play on their own Mc brand. So basically, it's to sort of tackle Starbucks, and essentially it's a McDonald's coffee shop, if that makes sense.
It's a coffee shop.
Well, yeah, it's a McDonald's coffee shop. So according to them, they've got 10 locations that are launched. The first one in Illinois. And essentially, they're going to be selling McFrappes, cappuccinos. And basically, they've got the breakfast menu. Apparently, it's to try and tackle that early morning rush for coffee and the late afternoon, when people want to sit down. There's some specific things on the menu that you won't get elsewhere. Churro frappes, I don't know what that is. Pretzel bites. So yeah, it's a whole spin-off venture from McDonald's.
I guess just you want to go in for a coffee. I mean, it's not do I see coffee? Is coffee on is that the main thing?
Well, it's think of it more as like a McDonald's Starbucks. It's more yeah, like a coffee shop, chill place as opposed to, the typical McDonald's experience of burgers.
It's funny because I am probably not the worst person to ask this, but I'm not a Starbucks guy.
Oh,
I
really?
Yeah, I'm not like I never, even when I was in New York at the time and
Yeah.
Starbucks was really coming out and about. Um, I'm actually I'm off of coffee for 4 months now.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
That's amazing.
I went off of coffee. I had one day that I missed coffee, and I had this massive headache.
Yeah.
And I said, "This can't be that I am so addicted to it that I get a withdrawal that
Jeez.
I get this bad headache." And for about 2 weeks, I had this really bad headaches, and then I'm not going back. Can't go back to it. So
Wow. A bit of
yeah,
a caffeine dependency, eh? How many coffees were you having, say,
I
in a
was
day?
only having one coffee a day, and
Oh,
actually a
wow.
Starbucks brand coffee. They have this
Oh,
Via Instant, which is like
okay.
a microbrew.
O-
So it tastes like it's brewed, but it's not. It's instant.
Okay.
Um, and it was good, but for overall my gut health, it was horrible. And
I
I can't tell
see.
you the benefits I've had
Yeah.
for not drinking coffee.
I so what can get you in the door of a cosmic, you don't see yourself walking in?
Tell you the truth, like it all looks like poison. It's filled with sugar, some of this stuff.
Look, I find it strange that, McDonald's in the past year or two, right? They've had mass layoffs. I mean, they've closed more than 100 locations just in the US. Actually, 400 locations in the US. They're consolidating, and now to come out of it to sort of not rebrand but launch a spin-off is fascinating. I
Meaning that
mean,
they realize that their business model has changed. I mean, I think people are much more conscientious, health wise, and what they're feeding their children. And they've done very little to kind of accommodate that. I
yeah,
mean, in America, there's all these type of diets, paleo diets, keto diets, and people are really responding to it in a
yeah.
mass level. Um, and I think that the brands haven't really recreated themselves in order to um, facilitate people that are eating healthier. Um,
So according to their CEO, Apparently, one of the USPs of this place is going to be the ability to, make customizable drinks and coffee, specifically for that afternoon rush. So again, that's very much, Starbucks bread and butter, So it's interesting that they're taking them on
I
quite
just
late in the
feel
game, but
I
yeah.
just feel like they're trying to beat them in their own game, and
Yeah.
I don't see like I don't see the value added in it. Has Starbucks gotten a little bit old? Yeah. Listen, I mean, this is two things. This is number one, the product and the branding, and I think the challenge that these companies have. And this is coming from someone that was in the fashion industry. I initially started in the fashion industry, and I'll never forget a really famous designer, really famous, George Marciano. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Guess.
Yeah.
In the time, he was a very famous designer. Speaking with him at an event, and he said the biggest mistake I ever made was that I didn't recreate my brand. Meaning,
Hmm.
like, for example, Ralph Lauren had his brand, Ralph Lauren, and then he had spin-offs. He had Lauren, he had Ralph, he had Polo Jeans, he had Polo, he had Polo Sport, and they would create all these brands around the initial brand of Ralph Lauren, and they would kind of get into markets or get into segments of their markets that they didn't have exposure to necessarily, but because they had the good name of Ralph Lauren, they were able to get into other markets. Now you see over time it wasn't sustainable, but there is a argument
Yeah.
of something becoming a little bit passe.
No, sure. I mean, look, both of all those brands that you mentioned, I mean, they've been going on for decades. And unless you're going to change with the markets and the times, you know, you're headed for obsolescence. And McDonald's has seen, I mean, not just McDonald's, I mean, Starbucks and McDonald's have closed many, many locations, in the past 5 years, but they've evolved, you know? So,
Sure.
and speaking of evolution, all right, Bitcoin has been, it's a personal fascination of mine, as an asset, because it has seen extreme highs, pushing beyond 70K to extreme lows. And now we're seeing a bit of a rush again where it's pushing above 34K. So what's happening, man?
So recently, I think it's more of a what's it called move, a market move based on the news, and really because it's going to perhaps the most important sign is that major financial firms are set to get regulatory approval to offer Bitcoin on a spot basis, not just on a future basis, and that's a major move
That's
for Bitcoin.
interesting. I mean,
So that makes it a lot more accessible to the public.
but at the same time, there's going to be increased, regulation from the US, I think coming out soon, and I mean, it's needed, but do you think that'll affect the price maybe negatively?
For sure. It's I look. I mean, for someone who's been in the markets for a long time and has seen booms and busts, and I'm talking about .coms, and I'm talking about housing markets, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about semiconductors, and all this type of stuff. Where you have this rush in this market, a lot of it is pumped up just because there are traders trading it,
Yeah.
and they're pumping it. So there's a lot of activity that's fictitious activity, to tell you the truth. I don't want to say it's it's not manipulation, but if you have all these prop traders that are coming in
Mm.
and they're pushing the particular asset higher, and especially because it's not a asset that is traded on a very large volume basis.
Right.
Although I believe Bitcoin is today, their average daily volume is pretty decent. But you have a lot of traders that are pumping it up, and as a result, it moves it higher than it maybe it really should. But again, what's the real value of Bitcoin? Like, you and I could argue for the next hour what the true value of gold is.
Right.
It has significance for its actual commodity basis. It's used
Yeah.
for chips, it's used
Manufacturing.
for manufacturing, it's used for jewelry, it's used for, ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Technology it's been used for, so it's used for a ton of stuff. But when you come to something like Bitcoin, what's
Yeah.
it
What's
worth?
it tied to?
What's it tied to? What's the true value of it? And that's why traditional people like Charlie Munger, I don't know if you know, he passed away. Would really say, this is just a bunch of garbage, because they couldn't value to anything that makes it valuable.
Yeah. I think once, it's not even a case so that it might happen. Once we start moving towards, digital currency, I think then we'll see the value. I mean the true potential of not just Bitcoin but cryptocurrencies and all.
Would you
Um,
want to see? I have a question before that. Would you want to see digital currency?
for I have an issue with the way, central banks work in general, but I'm more fearful of, a Wild West situation where your money isn't safe, it's all tied up digitally. And that's a dangerous precedent to set. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunities for growth. Like, yeah, never mind South Africa, but in Africa, we've seen the growth of, a countless banking systems. A big one's called Yoko Pay, for example. You don't need a bank account. You just have one of those, ATM speed point machines, and you can conduct transactions like that. Just bypassing the banks. A lot of potential, but let me ask you this: when it comes to Bitcoin, right? It's 34K, and I've seen on our own social media people ask this: have we missed the train?
So,
It's a lot of money,
okay. So, from a trader's perspective, okay,
right?
first of all, it's not a. I wouldn't look at it as an investment long term unless you got it
Yeah, yeah,
really low. That's from strictly a trading perspective. I mean, like I was covering it this morning, right? It was trading
right,
at 44,000. Now it's at 43,300. So it's sold off over 1,000 points. Now it's run up more than $15,000. So for it to retrace $1,000 is not a big deal.
right.
But at the same time, you know, there's nothing more than the technicals to go through when you're trading Bitcoin. However, with that said, you're very limited. You only have 10 years worth of data. So that's one. And two, it's really news events that are pumping and dumping this.
Yeah,
So
it's
like you
it's
said, in a few
yeah.
months, if it's going to be shot down because of the fact that they're going to add regulatory standards to it, and then you're going to say, oh, okay, so now it's a sell-off and it goes back to 16,000. So that, what's the top? What's the bottom? I don't know, and I don't think the markets know, and that's really something that we really just have to consider as a trader, that you're dealing and trading in a market that is solely market action.
It's that volatility is scary because I mean we've seen not just with Bitcoin, but we've seen what happens just with social media and the effect on it has on Bitcoin and crypto, as a whole. I mean, when was it back in 2022 when Elon Musk would just mention something regarding cryptocurrencies and all of a sudden we'd see huge, increases and decreases. So yeah, it's a very scary market to be in. However, it seems like it's quite lucrative. I mean,
Uh,
34,000.
so yes, it is quite lucrative. It is. You got to just be on the right side of the market. But you're right, it is lucrative.
And speaking of, sort of assets that have experienced a bit of volatility, gold set record highs, not
Also,
too not too long ago, yeah. Um I I remember one of our, I think it was our previous chat where we talking about the dollar weakness, and that's pushing people towards, more safe haven assets, specifically, gold. Is that still the case?
So
Is that
I
sort of the
think
driving factor?
no, I think it was more of the end of the year rally. It pushed higher, but it didn't sustain it. If you notice, technically speaking, if we look at the price of gold, gold spiked up to 2148, and then it corrected itself and made a U-turn and sold off. Now it's leveled off at 2033, and its original high was 2070-ish level. So we're about $40 off of our all-time highs. However, if you take into consideration that there's been inflation, and inflation is already in check in the market, then every price goes higher no matter what. That's just reality of it.
Yeah.
So the adjustment of the price of gold is just that adjustment. Now the volume didn't increase, so we're not backed up with tremendous amount of volume here that the market should go up to, let's say, 21, 22, 2300. So that's what's holding me off from saying, oh no, this is really strong.
So on December 8th, we're going to have the next, well, the final US NFP for the year, right?
Right.
If, for example, we see that unemployment data, it's not a good report, unemployment is high, etc., and that causes some dollar weakness, would we see a spike in the gold price?
I don't think so. I think that, the NFP is more related to the Dow Jones than to the price of gold.
Okay. And the
I think
US
that,
dollar.
well, yeah, I mean, the US dollar also, but I mean, when you're looking at the NFP, you're really looking at the country's domestic gross income. And so even the dollar is not as closely as related to the NFP as the Dow Jones would be. Just
Okay.
because the Dow Jones is the front line. I mean, it represents the corporations that represent that country, as opposed to the currency. I mean, overall, the currency may still be, solid, and the credit rating might still be solid. So the currency is not as closely related to the market news in relation to NFP as the Dow Jones is. But with that said, everything's up to consider. I mean, I don't think that there's going to be such a big surprise this quarter in NFP. What I'd
Yeah.
like to see is the first, well, really December's NFP, which will come out the first week of January,
Right.
uh, because the holiday season is like, for example, just to give it to you as an example, if I am a grocery store, but most of my business is located around the end of the week, right?
Right.
So for me to just, consider what sales I've done Sunday through Thursday is almost irrelevant, right? Because I want to know during the major part of the activity what's going on in that store. So same thing when it comes to unemployment and employment for that matter, is that between Thanksgiving and Christmas is the busiest time, shopping time of the year in the United States. And because of that, major retailers and major corporations actually boost up their employees um, in order that they can cater to the increased volume of business.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
and
makes
so,
sense. So it's going to
so
drive
as
up employment.
right, and as such, we want to know during that time what's the business atmosphere there, as opposed to any other time during the year.
Makes sense. Uh, Advice for traders out there, what with Bitcoin and NFP coming up and gold, reaching record highs?
So we generally rally into the end of the year. The question is whether or not we're going to do that this year, which should be kind of interesting. Um, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see how we're going to end off the year. Um, Maybe we'll be drinking eggnog, and maybe not.
Awesome. And I think on that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Fred, for all your awesome advice and insights.
Very good, Sergio.
Cool.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you on the next one, man.
You got it.